it's Christy from Mentally Kills back with another interview. Today I have Luke Greenheart here to introduce to you guys, so I'm going to bring him out. How you doing?
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great, thank you.
Thank you so much for being on. So I usually like to start by giving my guests a couple minutes to kind of tell us about yourself and why you're here.
Yeah, so I'll tell you first why I'm here is to do with the topic that's at hand, mental health. I'm very passionate about creating awareness to mental health, but just being involved in the conversation, the community aspect of it, because for most of my life it was something that was hidden, and in my own personal life, but also my mother had severe schizophrenia my entire life since childhood, and I never had a place to talk about it. The internet didn't exist then either, but it was taboo, it was secret, and it's like if she had a missing leg or some sort of real obvious ailment, people would talk about it, but because it was a mental illness, people didn't understand it, they didn't want to talk about it, and it left me in just a horrible place as a child. So now being at a point where that's not my issue anymore and I can talk about it, I love being a part of that socializing, that people are actually connecting on that level and talking about the importance of it, and not just the acceptance of it, but the embracing of that is something worthy of talking about and not shameful, because there was a lot of shame in my childhood around that area, in my own fears and judgments of what I thought others might think of me due to my mum's health, and then that developed in my life to my own mental health issues with depression, insomnia, chronic fatigue, and suicidal issues. So, and a little bit about me, as you can hear maybe from my accent, I'm from the UK, just south of London. So yeah, and that's where I grew up. And where do you want to dive into that story?
Well, first, I would like to commend you because from what I've researched on schizophrenia, it's a lot to deal with. And to grow up, I'm sure we're probably around the same age. I'm in my 30s. We didn't have the internet to pop on and kind of just Google something and say, what is this? It was kind of just learning and figuring out things for ourselves and figuring out how we can help, and that's mostly learned by making mistakes and doing the wrong thing and triggering in the wrong ways. So I just wanted to start by commending you for that, because it must have been very, very difficult to deal with something like that. I mean, I have borderline, and it's difficult for me and my family to go through. So schizophrenia, I can only imagine. Usually from here, I like to go on, basically just to talk about more so how you kind of went through your struggles and what you did to get through them. What kind of coping mechanisms did you use? How did you kind of pull yourself out when you get into those dark periods?
Yeah. Well, the first thing comes for me is when I was going through the struggles and I didn't necessarily know what to do. And that was in my teenage years, early teenage years, even before that, like 11 years old. Like I said, I had suicidal issues from about 7 years old. I couldn't stand life. I was suffering. I didn't understand what was going on in my environment. There was a lot of poverty, a lot of absence of food, and it was just chaos. And my mom had schizophrenia to the most extreme extent I've ever witnessed, and I've been in and out of all different mental hospitals because of her condition and visited places, and she was in the most padded cell, just really odd, strange behavior, and that just continued. And yeah, but when I was younger, it was sport. It was boxing, particularly for me, and it was that ability to let out aggression, that energy and frustration I had for life. I could let it out on the bags, and I told my coach at the beginning I weren't interested in fighting. I said, but I just want to hit the bags. And when I look back on it now, it was actually the space that he created where I was in there with other youths and I was accepted despite what was going on in my life. And I could turn up there a couple of times a week, really, really cheap as well. I didn't have a lot of money, but it was like £1 to turn up. And a lot of times he'd let me not pay because I just didn't have it. And I could just hit the bags for half an hour. And that I really felt helped. I think I would have been very aggressive outside if it wasn't for that release. That anger would have expressed itself somewhere else. But that at the beginning stages was my, say, coping mechanism, you could call it. It was something that I did that helped me just find a little bit of peace, but using that aggression. And then I got to the point in my later teens, and I am similar age to you, I'm in my mid-30s, but in my later teens, it was my ambitions for the future is what drove me. I was always like, the future's going to be better. One day, all this stuff will be fixed, life will be good, and I'll sort it out. And then in my mid-20s, life just got worse. Things just fell apart way beyond what I thought they ever could. And it was like, right, life isn't sorting itself out. Life isn't getting better. And that was my last suicidal issue. It was like 2015. I just couldn't take it. Life had been suffering, always been suffering. And even the future was going to be, I knew would be more suffering because I could see what was happening in my life. I had a love who's just had a cardiac arrest and I became her full-time carer. She was wheelchair bound. They said to me she won't live another 5 years. She was bedridden on all sorts of medication to hold back the pain and just to, yeah, just not in a good state. I was still caring for my mother, lost work, lost my job, and I was just in a really bad place. And it was in that time that something within me, in the last moments before I literally was going to jump off a bridge, something hit me and it was like, I'm going to find a way. I'm going to find a way to love life, to love myself, to just find something. There was a feeling, I can't even explain it. It was just like a feeling, a sense that I'm going to find something. And it was like I was sent on a new path. It's like there was a new direction to go to, and it was actually about me. It wasn't about Danielle who was suffering. It wasn't about my mother who was suffering. This was actually something for me, and that was foreign to me. That was something new because I'd always been the carer. I'd always been the provider in some aspect for others. And I didn't realize I'd not been doing that for myself. I didn't treat myself that way. And that was the beginning, I would say, of my process. And it was actually recognizing that. And then it got into separating my internal voice and realizing my own self-talk and conditioning, that I had become what I call an internal dictator within myself, where I pushed myself so hard to do things because life was such a struggle. And then having like chronic fatigue for many years and insomnia, it was like everything was always a push. And I didn't even recognize the depression until I looked back. Like in my early 20s, it was diagnosed, but I didn't realize till I looked back, like, wait, that's been there my entire sort of teens. It was there for such a long time. But you don't know to recognize it and you don't talk about it. You don't tell anyone. You put on that cold face or that straight face. Someone says, are you doing okay today? Yeah, I'm fine. You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to represent it. And I remember looking back now with like photos, I could never be in a photograph. There was hardly any pictures of me growing up because someone would say, smile for the picture. And I was like, I can't be fake. And there's no way I feel like smiling right now. Even if it's an event or something's happening, it's like I'm miserable inside. If you take a picture, I'm going to look that way. And I don't want to look back one day at that miserable child. So I just avoided it. I was like, I will take the picture. So that's a bit of my journey. I feel like I spoke a while then, but do you have any more questions on that?
Well, I would just like to say that I'm really glad you're still here. As somebody who's had a couple attempts myself, it is really hard when you get in them periods, and the fact that you had that clarity just beforehand to say, no, like, I'm worth being here. There's something out here for me that can help. And that takes a lot, because I know I didn't have that when I was in my moments. I was just really bad at making my attempts, apparently. So that's me trying to make humor out of it. I try to do that now because, I feel like when it comes to mental health and once you're finally on your healing path and your journey, you can look back and say, and make jokes about, or try to make light of situations that you've been through or things that you've gone through. Just for me, I'm a comedian, so that's my way of coping with things. I crack my little jokes and then I carry on. But I love some things that you said, and I want to point into that. Especially like you said, we're in the same age, around the same age group. I'm 31. So, it's close in age. I was always taught to suck it up, shake it off. You're all right. Oh, you don't know what tired is, or you don't know what sad is, or, you couldn't express when you were feeling something because it would be shut down and you would be invalidated. And that would make it feel worse. That happens a lot to people, especially our age. But that's because our parents were always conditioned to do just that. They didn't even need to be taught that or told that. They didn't even try. So to them, that was normal behavior. And that's something I wanted to point out too. You said you didn't know that what you were going through wasn't, let's say average feelings or average behaviors because nobody spoke about it. You didn't speak up about it because you thought like everybody felt that way. That's just sadness. But in reality, it was depression. People get sad, yes, but people don't get sad for weeks and months and years at a time. So that's the big difference. That's why it's so important to have what we have now, things like that, what you do, what we're about to get into, and programs like mine, where we have these kind of conversations and we can talk about it so people feel like they're not alone and that they can speak up. So if you want to tell us a little bit about what you do now, that'd be cool too.
Yeah, so what happened to me in my journey is, I'll start from a bit earlier. After doing the boxing, I got really into like fitness because of my mum's condition. I saw she had her mind wasn't in her control, say, and the body also that was neglected and wasn't working. It wasn't doing much function. She struggled to walk. She put on lots of weight, and there's all sorts of physical issues and mental issues she had. So from a young age, I was like, I've got to take care of my mind. I've got to take care of my body. Don't do drugs. Don't drink alcohol. Try and eat clean and exercise. And I followed that sort of routine from a really young age. And obviously they didn't get everything perfect. Who does? It's always changing and transforming. But that led me into fitness, and I become a personal trainer. I had to always work for myself while caring for my mum, because I couldn't hold down a normal job because something would happen. And having my own issues, some days you wake up and you can't get to work. You know, I would have been fired pretty quick. So I always had to look for ways to work for myself, and it was personal training I started with and fitness. But as my early 20s went in, I was really good at making someone strong. I was really good at getting someone lean, but my own health was still an issue. And then loved ones' health was an issue. And I was like, realizing I don't know anything about health. I know so much about fitness, you know, and I was like, but I don't know anything about health. And then when Danielle was diagnosed with basically death, they said she'll have another cardiac arrest within 5 years. And they said she'll never walk again. And she had mild brain damage because she literally died for 2 minutes. And they brought her back with the defibrillators. Luckily, there happened to be a paramedic in a shop when she had a cardiac arrest. And when she came back and I was told there's no hope, there's no future, you're just going to care for her till she dies, I was just like, what's the harm in now trying to find something else? And I went to alternative different cares and just started trying anything I could and everything I could within my facility to try and change that answer, because I just was not satisfied thinking I'm going to lose her, you know, in that short time and everything else. So ended up selling everything we own to be able to afford alternative care. And I can say now I'm really happily, it's 8 years later, and not only is she still alive, she's medication free and she's walking. Yeah, so she broke all the odds of what they said was possible. And along that journey, when I saw the results happening and I saw these different things happening, it was so many different people doing different tools and tactics that were making a difference. It wasn't just one direct path, and it was like, oh, go to this one guy and he'll fix everything. You know, it was like, go to this one, go to that place, go to this. But I saw little changes and I was like, I need to learn this. This is powerful stuff. This is stuff that's helping her. And along the journey, it was helping me. And it was within the few years that I was like, that's it. I'm going to train with people. I'm going to study with people. I'm going to tell them to teach me. I was like, I'm a sponge right now. I'm excited for this knowledge. And I was like, teach me what you do. Where do I go to learn what you learn? And along that path, I trained with all different specialists in all different tactics. And I learned lots of physical practice, how to manipulate someone's spine, how to release myofascial tissue, how to do acupressure, you know, reflexology, all different techniques towards the physical body. But then it was also the mind, the thoughts, the reoccurring thoughts, all these issues that cause anxiety and stress and the pressure. And I developed along that way my own method of what I call the Greenheart holistic method. And it's my own practice now that I try and put in. And I don't think there's one best method. I can only put in what's the best I can do, what's the most I can offer, you know. And I'm not saying it's the best, it's just the most, it's the best I can do. Yeah, and I'm always growing in it. I'm always trying to learn more and find more. But I work with people now, like I said, one-to-one in real life. When COVID hit, that was really hard. So I was like, what can I bring online? And this year I started working with people online to do one-on-one sessions, to go through what I call the 3 pillars of balance, which is their physical health. So we assess the physical body, see where and what we maybe tweak, or who I can recommend them to go to for that. Or it'll be, we work on the emotional body and check where their mind is, where their thoughts are. And we can do a lot of that online one-to-one. And then the input, what they consume, what they don't consume. And that includes what they watch, what they read, you know, because even that has an impact. If you spend all day watching horror movies, you're going to feel a certain way. It's going to impact your system in a certain way. So it's going through all of them. And when they're in balance, you have a foundation of strength within yourself to build towards something else. So then it comes into your life and purpose and place, your passions, your desires, your faith. But you have a foundation that you can then grow from. Because I've been in the position where I was ambitious, I had purpose, I had direction, I was wanting life, but my body was weak, my body was tired, my mind was scattered and all over the place. And it just frustrated me more that I couldn't act upon what I really wanted to do. I couldn't have the energy to do it. I couldn't keep the consistency in my mind to follow through. So it was like getting them foundations. I've noticed is what's needed for so many. And some people, they don't feel there is a purpose. You know, like you said, when you get suicidal, you really feel worthless, like there's no value in life itself. That means there's no value within yourself. And that's a really horrible place to be. And I've been there. So it's like, and I'm full of faith now that life is a gift, no matter what. I feel blessed for all my experiences. And someone else would say they're horrible, horrible experiences. I said, but they made me able to serve now. And I think that's what life's about.
I think that's a beautiful way to go about things. It's a beautiful way to look at life. You know, you found your purpose, and that is through helping others. Through helping others, you're helping yourself. So I think that's really great. I know that you have your YouTube too. Is your YouTube kind of where you give like little tutorial videos, or what can we find on your YouTube? Because we are getting close to ending.
Yeah, YouTube started at the beginning of COVID. I saw depression and suicide skyrocket. And I was like, I've been there and I'm not there now. I haven't had a suicidal thought since the last one in 2015. It hasn't even appeared, and I feel it never will. And my depression's also gone after like 20 years. So I was like, I've been in that place and I'm not there now. I'm just going to talk about it. Someone needs to be talking about it at least. So I was like, I'm just going to just start talking. I'm going to talk about what worked when I was a child, like the boxing. I'm going to talk about what not to do to someone that's depressed, because there were things that used to really upset me when I was depressed, when someone would be really sympathetic and like just certain things they would say that would actually really irritate me and make me feel a lot worse. Start comparing, say, people that have got it much worse than I have and they're in a starving country, and I'm like, that doesn't make me feel better. I know there's people suffering, and now you're making me think about that while I'm already suffering. I'm like, I'm suffering more. You know, and it's like some people say some things when you're depressed and suicidal that really make you feel more depressed and more suicidal. So I talked about that, talked about the different things I have done that worked for me in case they work for someone else. But it was mainly just shining a light of possibility. So that's what started my YouTube channel. After a year of talking about myself, I started a podcast because I thought I want to hear other people's stories and journeys, because I talked a lot about myself. So let's talk to other people. I think the communication is important for people to have open conversations, especially when we were locked down. But even before we was locked down, I started to notice doing the podcasting, and you might resonate with this. So I had deeper, meaningful, more conversations where I got to know someone so much more than people that I've known for years. So I was like, oh, well, that's important. That's something that's actually needed, not only for myself. Like my podcast is called The Selfish Podcast because selfishly it's for me. Yeah, but I think you need to be selfish to serve. Yeah, and it's just a cycle. But yeah, so that's what's on my YouTube channel.
Beautiful. So I'll have to definitely check that out as soon as we're done here. And you're absolutely right, especially me by doing these interviews. Not only did it make me feel great and I established connections that were really deep with people that I would have never met ever, you know, in my day-to-day life, but it also helped me on my healing journey, you know, and the things that I was dealing with. It's helped me a lot with that. I've learned a lot about my condition just by listening to others with similar or different conditions, because with borderline, a lot of the symptoms I have resonate in other mental health conditions as well. So I learned things about my condition. I was like, you guys have that too? That's not just me, you know, because it's easy to feel alone when you have mental health conditions. And I love that you're helping to create a safe space for people to come and talk about it, you know, and establishing those relationships. That's really great. But because we're coming to the end of our little interview here, I'm going to give you the floor for a minute or two to just give a, you know, a word of advice or anything you want to say to anybody who might be watching. And then I will drop you out and give my closing statement. We'll be all done.
Yeah, so my closing statement, and at first it may sound a little controversial, but it's about self-improvement. And I want people out there who are on a path where they say healing, they're on a path of change, of growth, they may be in a struggling place, is to know you're not broken, you're not damaged, you're not worthless, you're not unvaluable. And you don't need to improve. Improve means that you're something wrong. I want you to see yourself as good enough. I want you to see that you can develop. So change it to you're on self-development. You're developing upon your life. You're going to use your life and experiences rather than be used by them and be useful. But no, there's a possibility of change. There's a possibility of growth. There's a possibility of usefulness within you, and that you're valuable and you're worth it and you have a place. And I think everyone out there deserves to have that feeling and sensation that life is worth it and they are worth it. I'd say that's my main message, is that you're just not broken and you're not damaged. And to love yourself.
I think that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on and giving us your wisdom and your time. And I'll give my closing statements. We'll be all done.
Thanks for having me.
So, to wrap things up, you can go through anything in life, but as long as you understand that you have a purpose and that you're worth more than what you're giving yourself, that's really all that matters. We have to love ourselves, and sometimes our path to healing involves healing others. So, spread a little love today. And with that being said, this is Christy from Mentally Kills, and I will see you on the next interview.